Stephen Chow, celebrated globally as the Asian comedy king, gifted us timeless classics like Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer, his name synonymous with a unique brand of nonsensical humor that conquered a continent and beyond. His journey from a young boy in Hong Kong to an international cinematic icon is legendary. Yet, beneath the surface of his unparalleled success and infectious laughter lies a more intricate narrative, marked by relentless ambition, intense creative battles, and personal controversies that often rippled through the industry. Join us as we explore the multifaceted life of this enigmatic genius. For more deep dives into your favorite stars, hit subscribe. Stephen Chow's journey to becoming Asia's comedy king began in a Hong Kong that was rapidly changing, a place of vibrant energy but also stark contrasts. Born in June 1962, his early life wasn't one of privilege or ease. His parents, who had moved from mainland China, faced the common immigrant struggle for financial stability. The city was a bustling metropolis, but for a young boy in a family just trying to make ends meet, it meant understanding the value of things and the sting of not having enough. This environment, where resourcefulness was key, perhaps subtly planted the seeds for the clever, often underdog characters he would later portray. His parents' marriage eventually dissolved, and Stephen, along with his sisters, was raised primarily by his mother. This single-parent household undoubtedly presented its own set of challenges, instilling in him a sense of responsibility, and perhaps a quiet resilience that would serve him well in the notoriously tough Hong Kong film industry. Friends and acquaintances from his early years often describe him as a quiet and observant child, not the boisterous comedian he would later become known as on screen. He was more of an introvert, someone who soaked in the world around him. A pivotal influence during these formative years was, famously, Bruce Lee. The martial arts legend wasn't just a movie star. He was a cultural icon, a symbol of strength, charisma, and a distinctly Hong Kong spirit. After watching a Bruce Lee film, a young Stephen was reportedly captivated, inspired by Lee's power and on-screen presence. This admiration wasn't just a fleeting childhood fancy. It would deeply permeate his later work, with many of his films paying homage to Lee through action sequences and character traits. This early fascination with martial arts and heroic figures contrasted with his own more reserved demeanor, perhaps hinting at a rich inner world where imagination and ambition were brewing. When Stephen Chow decided to pursue a career in entertainment, the path was far from smooth. The Hong Kong television and film industries were highly competitive, and breaking in required talent, luck, and often the right connections. His initial attempts to join Television Broadcast Limited's, or TVB's, prestigious acting school were met with rejection. For many aspiring actors, such a setback could have been discouraging enough to quit, but Chow persevered. It was his friend, Waze Lee, who was also applying, who actually helped him get a second look. Eventually, he was accepted and graduated from the acting course in 1982. However, graduation didn't immediately translate into the dramatic roles he might have yearned for. Instead, he found himself typecast. Like many young actors trying to find their footing in a genre that was far removed from the action heroes he admired or the comedic genius he would later unleash. For several years, Stephen Chow was primarily known to Hong Kong audiences as a host of 4:30 Space Shuttle, a popular children's television program. While it provided steady work and visibility, it was a period he reportedly found creatively stifling. The cheerful, G-rated persona required for children's television was a world away from the anarchic, subversive humor that would later define him. Imagine a young man, his mind buzzing with comedic ideas and parodies, having to stick to a script meant for young children. It must have been a test of patience and a period of quiet frustration. He was learning the ropes of television production, gaining on-camera experience. But the roles were small, often in drama series, where he had little chance to showcase his unique comedic timing or a distinct personality. He was in the system, but he was still very much on the periphery of stardom, struggling to get noticed for the kind of work he truly wanted to do. These years of toiling in relative obscurity, playing minor parts, or engaging in playful antics for kids were crucial in their own way, perhaps building a hunger and a determination that fueled his later meteoric rise. The turning point? The moment when Stephen Chow began to transition from a largely overlooked television actor to a burgeoning film star came in the late 1980s. His talent for comedy started to get noticed in supporting roles, but it was the 1989 TVB drama series, The Final Combat, that really gave him a platform to shine. While a drama, it allowed for some of his comedic flair. This was followed by his true cinematic breakthrough in the 1990 film All for the Winner. This movie, a parody of the then popular God of Gamblers starring Chow Yun-fat, was a colossal success. It was here that Stephen Chow, alongside his director Jeffrey Lau, truly unleashed what would become his signature style, mo lei tao. This Cantonese term, roughly translating to nonsensical or makes no sense, perfectly encapsulated the rapid-fire verbal gags, absurd situations, slapstick physicality, and pop culture parodies that characterized his humor. Audiences had never seen anything quite like it. It was fresh, irreverent, and incredibly funny, speaking directly to a younger Hong Kong generation. All for the Winner didn't just make Stephen Chow a star, it made him a phenomenon. Almost overnight, he became Hong Kong's most bankable comedic actor. The early 1990s saw him star in an astonishing string of box office hits, including Fight Back to School, Justice, My Foot, and Royal Tramp. He was prolific, sometimes appearing in half a dozen or more films in a single year, each one eagerly anticipated by a public hungry for his unique brand of comedy. He wasn't just an actor anymore. He was a cultural force, the undisputed king of comedy. His characters were often underdogs who triumphed through wit, luck, and a healthy dose of absurdity. They were relatable despite the surreal circumstances they found themselves in. Even as his fame skyrocketed, whispers began to circulate within the industry about his working style. While not yet the full-blown public controversies that would mark his later career, there were early indications of an intense focus and a demanding nature on set. He was known for improvising heavily, for having very specific ideas about how a scene should play out, and for pushing himself and others to get the perfect comedic take. This perfectionism, while a key ingredient in the quality and originality of his films, could sometimes be challenging for his collaborators. However, during this initial explosion of popularity, the sheer success of his movies tended to overshadow any minor rumblings of on-set difficulties. The audience couldn't get enough, and Stephen Chow was busy cementing his legend, one nonsensical, laugh-out-loud moment at a time, completely reshaping Hong Kong cinema in his own image. As Stephen Chow moved into the mid-1990s, his grip on the Hong Kong box office showed no signs of loosening. If anything, it tightened. He was no longer just the leading man of mo lei tao comedy. He was its primary architect, its most recognizable face, and increasingly its guiding hand behind the camera. His ambition extended beyond just delivering hilarious lines and performing exaggerated pratfalls. He began to take on directorial duties, a natural progression for someone with such a distinct and all-encompassing comedic vision. Films like From Beijing with Love, a brilliant James Bond parody released in 1994, and God of Cookery from 1996 showcased his evolving talent. These weren't just vehicles for his acting, they were projects where his creative fingerprints were all over the script, the pacing, and the overall aesthetic. God of Cookery, in particular, was a masterful blend of his signature outrageous humor with a surprisingly heartfelt story of redemption, a combination that would become a hallmark of his best work. His directorial efforts were met with both critical acclaim and continued commercial success, solidifying his status as a true auteur of comedy. He was building an empire of laughter, film by film, proving that his Midas touch extended to shaping the entire cinematic experience. However, as Stephen Chow's creative control intensified, so too did the whispers and then outright declarations about his methods on set. The demanding nature that had perhaps been an undercurrent in his earlier years now came to the forefront. With the added responsibility of directing, his perfectionism reached new levels. Numerous collaborators, from fellow actors to crew members, began to speak about the immense pressure of working on a Stephen Chow film. He was known for his meticulous attention to detail, for wanting every gag, every expression, every movement to be exactly as he envisioned it. This often meant countless retakes, last-minute script changes, and an environment where his word was absolute law. While many acknowledge that this relentless pursuit of perfection contributed to the high quality and innovative nature of his films, it also bred resentment and frustration. Stories circulated about him being autocratic, difficult to please, and sometimes prone to sharp criticisms or abrupt dismissals of ideas that didn't align with his own. The very intensity that fueled his genius also made him a challenging figure to work alongside. It was a paradox. The man who brought so much joy to audiences was increasingly being described as a taskmaster by those who helped bring his visions to life. This demanding style inevitably led to significant rifts with some of his most valued and long-term collaborators, creating unfortunate headlines and disappointing many fans. The most publicized of these was his falling out with Ung Man Tat. Ung, a veteran character actor, had been Chow's indispensable comedic partner through most of his biggest hits in the early to mid-1990s. Their on-screen chemistry was legendary, with Ung often playing the perfect foil to Chow's zany protagonists. The news that their partnership had fractured was a significant blow to the Hong Kong film world. While both parties were often diplomatic in public, the reasons cited usually pointed towards creative differences and the inherent difficulties of Chow's exacting directorial approach. Ung Man Tat himself, in later interviews, alluded to the strain, though often with a sense of melancholy rather than outright bitterness. This wasn't an isolated incident. Other actors and filmmakers who had been part of Chow's regular ensemble also found themselves drifting away or having public disagreements. The price of his singular vision, it seemed, was sometimes the alienation of those who had helped him achieve it. These professional divorces painted a picture of a brilliant but uncompromising artist, one perhaps increasingly isolated by his own exacting standards. Despite these growing internal pressures and controversies surrounding his working relationships, Stephen Chow's cinematic output during this period reached new artistic and international heights. He was pushing the boundaries of Hong Kong comedy, incorporating more sophisticated special effects and more complex thematic elements. The real game changer on the global stage was Shaolin Soccer, released in 2001. This audacious blend of kung fu, soccer, and his trademark humor, all supercharged with dazzling CGI, was unlike anything audiences had seen before. It broke box office records in Asia and, crucially, garnered significant attention in the West, winning awards at film festivals and securing international distribution. It was a triumph of imagination and technical skill, proving that Chow's comedic language could transcend cultural barriers. He followed this up with what many consider his masterpiece, Kung Fu Hustle, in 2004. This film, which he also directed, co-wrote, and starred in, was an even more ambitious and polished production. A loving homage to classic martial arts films and Looney Tunes cartoons, it was a visual spectacle filled with incredible fight choreography, memorable characters, and, beneath the slapstick, a genuine warmth. Kung Fu Hustle received widespread critical acclaim globally, earning nominations for major awards, including a Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film, and further cemented Chow's reputation as a world-class filmmaker. He was no longer just Hong Kong's comedy king. He was a recognized international talent. Yet, even amidst this peak of creative and commercial success, The complexities of managing such large-scale productions and the intense financial pressures of the film industry may have been sowing the seeds for future difficulties. The intricate deals involved in funding, producing, and distributing these increasingly ambitious films were a world away from the simpler, faster-paced productions of his early career. While major public lawsuits and financial scandals would become more prominent in the subsequent phase of his career, it's reasonable to assume that the high stakes of this period, involving large sums of money, numerous stakeholders, and complex contractual obligations, created an environment where misunderstandings or disputes could easily arise. The focus was squarely on the cinematic triumphs, on the laughter and the awards. But beneath the surface, the business of being Stephen Chow, the international movie mogul, was becoming increasingly complicated. His journey through the mid-1990s to the mid-2000s was a period of incredible artistic evolution and global recognition, but it also highlighted the personal and professional costs that sometimes accompanied his unwavering and often isolating pursuit of cinematic perfection. As Stephen Chow transitioned into the late 2000s and beyond, a noticeable shift occurred in his career trajectory. The man who had once been a ubiquitous presence on screen, effortlessly embodying a gallery of comedic anti-heroes, began to step back from acting. His focus sharpened almost exclusively on directing, helming massive blockbuster productions increasingly tailored for the booming mainland Chinese market. Films like CJ7, released in 2008, offered a family-friendly sci-fi premise, while Journey to the West, Conquering the Demons in 2013, and The Mermaid in 2016 shattered box office records in China, demonstrating his continued Midas touch, at least commercially. While he occasionally lent his voice or made fleeting cameo appearances, his signature on-screen persona became a rarer sight. This move behind the camera full-time allowed him to control his cinematic visions on an even grander scale, utilizing cutting-edge special effects and orchestrating epic narratives. However, it also meant that audiences who longed for his unique comedic performances were often left wanting. This period, while marked by enormous financial success for his directorial efforts, was also fraught with high-profile legal battles and persistent rumors of financial disputes, casting long shadows over his achievements. One of the most protracted and publicized was the lawsuit involving his former girlfriend, Alice Yu Manfeng. Yu, who had also been involved in managing some of his business affairs, sued Chow for substantial sums she claimed were unpaid commissions from lucrative property investments they had made together. The legal wrangling dragged on for years, generating endless media fodder and offering the public a glimpse into the complex financial dealings of the intensely private filmmaker. Though Chow eventually won the case, the prolonged public scrutiny and the airing of personal grievances undoubtedly took a toll. Beyond this specific case, there were recurring reports and sometimes legal actions concerning financial arrangements with investors in his film projects. These often involved complex bet-on agreements, where investors were purportedly guaranteed certain profit margins, leading to disputes when those ambitious targets were allegedly not met. Coupled with intermittent media stories about Chow mortgaging his luxurious properties, including his iconic home on the Peak in Hong Kong, speculation about his financial stability became a recurring theme, though his representatives often moved to clarify these situations or deny any dire financial straits. The well-established narrative of Stephen Chow being a challenging personality to work with did not fade away during this era. Even with new sets of collaborators on his large-scale mainland Chinese productions, the familiar refrains about his exacting demands, autocratic style, and tendency for last-minute sweeping changes persisted. While some admired his unwavering commitment to his vision, others found the working environment overly stressful and creatively stifling. The very qualities that drove him to innovate and achieve cinematic excellence often seemed to create friction and distance in his professional relationships. It appeared that the intensity that had characterized his earlier work continued unabated, even as the scale and budgets of his projects grew exponentially. Creatively, while his films continued to draw massive audiences, particularly in mainland China, a segment of critics and longtime fans began to express a sense of disappointment. Some felt that his later works, though visually spectacular, lacked the raw, anarchic charm and clever wit of his Hong Kong classics. Criticisms often centered on an over-reliance on CGI at the expense of character-driven comedy, a perceived recycling of old themes and gags, or a certain emotional hollowness beneath the spectacle. There were increasingly vocal calls for him to return to acting, to once again grace the screen with the kind of performances that had defined a generation of comedy. This creative critique represented a new kind of hardship, the challenge of meeting the sky-high expectations he himself had set, and of staying fresh and innovative in a rapidly changing film landscape. Adding to the public scrutiny, Chow faced a wave of media attention and controversy in 2021 due to his association with UK Chung, a 17-year-old unsuccessful Miss Hong Kong contestant. Photographs and reports emerged of them on a yacht together, sparking considerable public discussion and criticism due to the significant age gap, as Chow was 59 at the time. While Chow's camp vehemently denied any romantic relationship, emphasizing it was a group outing, the incident nonetheless generated negative headlines and fueled public gossip, highlighting the intense scrutiny that followed his personal life. Furthermore, his immense fame unfortunately made his name a target for fraudulent activities by unrelated third parties. For instance, in the lead-up to highly anticipated projects like his planned film Women's Soccer, reports surfaced of online scams attempting to lure unsuspecting fans with fake offers of paid opportunities to meet cast members or even secure roles. While Chow himself was not implicated in these schemes, such incidents created negative buzz and required his team to issue clarifications, an unwelcome distraction and a hardship born of his own immense popularity. Through all these challenges, both professional and personal, Stephen Chow continued to operate under the immense pressure and sky-high expectations that come with being a cinematic legend, navigating the complexities of his later career in the ever-watchful public eye. Stephen Chow's indelible mark on cinema is undeniable. His films continue to entertain and inspire, transcending cultural and generational divides. Despite the reputation for being a demanding perfectionist, the highly publicized fallouts with collaborators, and the various legal and financial challenges that punctuated his career, his unique comedic vision revolutionized Asian filmmaking. The title, King of Comedy, was not easily won, reflecting both his extraordinary talent and the often turbulent path he navigated to achieve and maintain it. What's your take on his career? Share your thoughts below, and for more untold stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel.